The following are two hauntings from England. Abbas Hall. Abbas Hall is a small country house in Great Carnard, a large village that is part of the town of Sudbury in the county of Suffolk in the east of England. Abbas Hall has an Elizabethan exterior, and inside is a medieval two-bay aisled hall built around 1290. The floor in the Great Hall was put in about 1549. The original occupier of the house and the estate was the Westmoreland Abbey's manorial steward. The steward's job was to direct the management of land, crop and livestock productivity and manorial finances, and would also oversee village judicial proceedings. Abbas Hall is one of only two examples of late 13th century aisled hall houses in Suffolk, and inside you can still see traces of the original wooden frame. In the 1950s, a resident of the hall was a woman by the name of Yvonne Spalding, who was later to live in the hall rent-free. In exchange for her free accommodation, the owner, a solicitor, had her look after the property as well as tend to a herd of Jersey cattle that she kept on the nearby estate on the Essex border that was owned by a Lord Abinger. In 1952, Miss Spalding reported hearing footsteps accompanied by heavy dragging noises coming from one of the bedrooms upstairs. On inspection, there was nothing to be seen, and there was no explanation for the noises. On another occasion, Lord Abinger had told Yvonne that one day when he was walking past the hall, he could see the face of an old woman looking through the upstairs window. He quickly notified Yvonne of what he had just witnessed. When they went to investigate, there was no trace of the old woman. One evening when Yvonne was alone in the house and reading in the living room, she suddenly heard the sound of the latch on the kitchen door move. This had immediately alerted her Dachshund dog and Siamese cat, who abruptly lifted their heads and appeared to follow something that was moving towards the door that opened to the stairway. She then heard the latch to the stairway door open, whereupon the same dragging noise that she had previously heard was dragging his feet. Terrified and realizing that something was not quite right, and without inspecting the noise, she quickly picked up her pets and rushed out of the hall and spent the rest of the evening at a friend's house. The hauntings at Abbas Hall came to the attention of a man called Philip Paul. Paul was a paranormal investigator from the Ghost Club. The Ghost Club was founded in London in 1862 and is believed to be the oldest such organisation in the world, with past members such as Charles Dickens and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. In March 1952, Philip Paul held a séance at Abbas Hall that included 8 men and 5 women, including 2 doctors. The séance took place in an upstairs bedroom where blankets were hung over the windows and doors. The séance went from 8:15 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. The medium was a man named John, who after going into a trance said, "This building stands on the proposed site of an early Dominican monastery, but there was controversy about it and a heated battle was fought. A monastery was built nearby. Unknown to the medium, there were footings of a monastery in the garden." The medium continued. "This building was used by refugees from the Great Plague. Then some Dutch people lived here. They had 1 child, a mentally deficient girl. She died by falling from an upper window in the house. Her father was accused of murder by disposing of the body in a nearby well and placed in stocks. She is coming into this room and now into the circle. She wants to be seen. She has 2 teeth missing from the upper set." The medium asked the ghost of the girl to knock, and tapping came from several parts of the darkened room. After the medium left, Philip Paul and his wife Madge remained at the haunted house. The séance was reported in the newspaper called the Daily Herald. The following day, a well close to the hall was inspected where they found some bones. 2 American GIs by the name of Harvey McDowell and Elroy Gunther had read about the séance in the newspaper and wanted to spend the night at Abbas Hall with Paul and his wife. Whilst Paul was asleep, the 2 American soldiers were eating, and they and Madge Paul could hear footsteps coming from the bedroom above where the séance was held. Mrs. Paul then saw a small figure standing in the doorway, and later in the bathroom, a woman told her to go away. "I don't want you here." That night, while Mrs. Paul was in bed in that room, the same woman awoke her, but this time she smiled at her. Strangely, the only person to see the ghost was Mrs. Paul, where her husband and the 2 soldiers had witnessed nothing, and that Mrs. Paul was possibly psychic. It is interesting to note that Abbas Hall is only about 70 miles from the infamous haunted house Borley Rectory in Essex. Backford Hall. Backford Hall is near Chester, Cheshire, in northwest England, and the following events took place in the 1990s. In 1996, two ghost hunters by the name of Mike McManus and David Williams, along with a team of researchers, decided to investigate the historic building and set out to hold all-night vigils. On a couple of occasions, the door to the original cellars was seen and heard to slam shut a few times. The doors were extremely heavy and could not have shut on their own accord. On many occasions, they would hear the sound of a dog barking and could be heard walking down corridors, and was also heard panting in various parts of the building. The sound of children laughing, playing, and singing along with a woman laughing was also heard. They would hear footsteps coming down the stairs at the top of the building, where the servants' quarters and attic were once located. As one of the men was seated, a rasping sound was close to his ear, which unnerved him somewhat. One of the team sighted a female wearing a long pink dress and a cream-lace bodice, and was wearing what looked like ballet shoes. Her hair was worn in ringlets, and she had a very pale complexion. She was being escorted up the stairs by a man. The woman was seen on another occasion, but without the man. While setting up a camcorder, Mike McManus saw a grey misty shape, then clearly heard a female voice say the name Dave. He asked other members of the team whether they had said anything, but they were out of the room when it happened. David Williams then left the room and came back a few seconds later asking who had shouted his name twice. When an audio tape was replayed, they could plainly hear a female voice calling out various names. Some they knew and some they didn't. The names they did not know were Anne, Joseph and Lucy. A few weeks later, Mike was visiting Backford Church that was situated in the grounds of Backford Hall, and came upon 3 graves close to one another. The names on the graves were Anne, Joseph and Lucy, where one of the names was just 5 years of age. On another occasion, David and Mike were walking around and plainly heard a deep sigh that was followed by the slamming of a door. They ran to other team members to ask if anyone had left the room. They hadn't. Fortunately, the loud sigh and the door slamming were caught on audio and lasted for over half an hour. A dark shadow was seen walking along the balcony, followed by another deep sigh. They would regularly hear poltergeist-type activities such as raps that came from an office door, where the camera suddenly lost power when the batteries were drained and the camcorders stopped working. Then a large paper clip came out of nowhere, almost striking one of the team members on the face. Their monitoring equipment was set up on a large table where some of the members were seated. All of a sudden the table began to visibly shake before jumping up and down, with many witnesses but no explanation. Strangely, though, 2 objects on the table had not even moved when the table was jumping up and down. Shortly after the event, a child could be heard laughing. On the last occasion when Mike McManus was visiting the hall, he was upstairs when he heard the sound of a dress rustling followed by a woman laughing. David Williams saw a white misty shape going through a closed door before coming back through the door, and then up to the balcony where some team members were standing, which was caught on camera. When they made inquiries about the hall, ladies said she'd lived at the building as a child between 1951 and 1954, and told them that a lady in grey haunted the building and was seen on many occasions, walking the corridors and outside near the lake. The woman said she would play with the children, yet she was an only child. So who was she playing with? She said their family had a dog that had to be put down. Was this the dog that could be heard walking around and barking, looking for its owner? They also found that a maid had died after falling down the back stairs. Was she pushed or did she fall? And was she the person with the deep sighs?